Mira, now, we've constantly put the spotlight on education and schools, the future of our children, and the way all of this has been impacted by the pandemic. I bring another conversation to you tonight in the light of the fact that a few of the states in our country have reopened schools and children have begun to go there. In a few states have even reported some infections taking place. Few other states are planning to open schools from next week or end of this month in September. But then there are states like Maharashtra where there is a big debate raging on whether now is a good time to reopen schools. There are very clear, strong sides and arguments on both sides on whether schools should open or not open. So Maharashtra, for example, was going to and looking at reopening schools, but the State COVID task force, we understand, is not in the favor of reopening schools. They say the children have not been vaccinated yet and now would not be a good time. So the government has put that decision on hold. Delhi is still tracking the situation as far as all other classes is concerned. Currently, only class 12 students are permitted to go for some time. Rajasthan, there is a panel that was set up that has said that the schools for higher classes can reopen, and so they will from September. Himachal Pradesh actually reopened its schools for class 10 to 12 from August 1st. And very quickly, they saw cases being reported. By August 11, they had seen 60 cases of infections, and the government then went on to shut down these schools for a few days. And Himachal actually is not the only one. Punjab has also reopened its schools. 33 students were found COVID positive, 21 students alone in 2 of the schools in Ludhiana itself. Those specific schools have been shut down, but not all in Punjab. In Haryana, in Fatehabad, 6 students were found infected. In March, in fact, as well, before the second wave hit, there were several children who were infected in Karnal. And Himachal Pradesh, like I told you, has now shut their schools. But there are other states like Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, who are actually gearing up to open the schools from next week. Where do you stand in the debate? What is your view, to take the risk or not take the risk? Can we afford to have children locked up in their homes any longer without the kind of education that they should be getting at this point of time? That's the key question. I say good evening to the panelists who are joining me right now. Avneeta Beal, Director Principal for R.N. Poddar School in Mumbai. Dr. Jyoti Gupta, Director Principal for DPS Hyderabad, joins us this evening. AGS Ganpati Rao, President for Andhra Pradesh Primary Teachers Association, also with me this evening. We'll also have Dr. VISHAL RAO, member of the Karnataka COVID Task Force, who's with us. Dr. K.K. Talwar, advisor to Punjab government on health and medical education. And Dr. ANITA MATHEW, infectious disease specialist in a hospital in Mumbai, joining me. But before I go to all these panelists, I have 2 young girls, 2 students who have a very clear view on what should happen and what they want. Tia Gupta and her sister Rania, both of them are joining me right now. Tia is in class 7th and Rania is in class 4th. And Tia, in fact, you so strongly believe that this should happen that you've actually convinced your grandfather to, take your voice to the court and file a petition, I understand.
Yeah, we filed a petition on regarding like a roadmap on where vaccinations for children are concerned.
Okay, so what is your view? Why do you want the schools to reopen?
I want the schools to open because we've been sitting at home for so long, and because there have been so many mental health cases like from children around me, and I do strongly believe that normalcy should return to Delhi since the COVID cases have decreased. And yeah.
Okay, and your sister Rania, are you just bored of looking at your parents' faces? Do you want to just go and meet your friends instead for some time? Is that why you want to go back to school?
Yes, mostly. And also because I'm so used to now looking up to my parents, I really want to look up to the government for reopening schools.
Yes, and what is it, that one thing that you miss the most about school?
My best friend.
Yeah. But what about the study part? as far as your classes are concerned, do you enjoy the classes online? Are you able to interact with your teacher properly?
Yes, it's okay, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. Tia, do you have the same view? How have you adapted to online classes? Since any which ways youngsters your age are so good with gadgets and screen time.
Yeah, I feel that pretty much our online school can only take you so far. And as far as the participation has been concerned, like a lot of children are nowadays like getting less motivated, I guess, to study online. That's why our school has actually opened every once a week. But otherwise, the children have stopped being so motivated, like online and all. But because as I said before, online school can only take you so far.
Okay, online education can only take you so far. Stay on with me, young girls. Two young girls with a very clear view and clearly dying to go back to school. Avnita Beer, one aspect that these two young ladies have raised is that of being able to interact and to have a better medium of teaching. Online only works for them to a certain extent. Avnita, isn't that a larger problem that so many students are facing today? They need to get out, meet their friends, see their teachers face to face, and get that kind of education. I think you're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself.
I agree with the little girls that children are missing out on the socialization, the connect, because education is as much about relationships and connections as it is about academic learning. So when children say that they've been isolated for so long and they are craving to meet with in person with their teachers and their friends.
Sorry, Avnita, I think there's a bit of an echo. We are unable to hear the voice, your voice properly.
I think there's a video playing, I think, at your end.
No, I think Tia will have to just mute her mic so that we are able to hear everybody else better. Yes, go ahead, Avnita.
Yeah. So, like I was saying that, socialization and the connect that children feel with their friends and their teachers, I think that's a very important, integral part of, schooling. And that is what the children have missed in these 1.5 years of isolation. And that is what we need to really put in place because, children are parents and children are moving around otherwise, but they're not being coming to school. So I feel that, if we could, in a very, very, cautious manner, open schools, maybe just for interaction, take baby steps and, try out for, try calling them for a, brief while so that they get to interact with their peers, they get to interact with their teachers, they feel the school and maybe academic, learning can follow little later. But the most essential part right now is the disconnect that they're feeling with each other, with their friends, with the school. And I think that's a very, very, a very big loss. I mean, that's a bigger loss than the learning loss, I would say.
Okay, so you're saying let's take it slow, but let's start reopening little by little, take all the precautions. But let me bring in Dr. Anita Matthew, because Dr. Matthew, the task force for Maharashtra is a little, not convinced that now is a time to open up schools. They've had series of meetings, including one yesterday with the government. What are the concerns here? We were under the impression that while COVID is still here, and of course it can infect children, it's not, the fatality rate is not so concerning.
So the first and the foremost is we were expecting something like a third wave to come in. And the concern for us is the children of the population who have not been vaccinated. Now, with an unvaccinated population sitting there, they actually would have a higher risk of getting infected and infecting their peer group as well as the families around. Now, you are going to look at a situation where we would land up having a much more and a worse situation in terms of COVID in a state like Maharashtra, where we already have, we are still battling the epidemic. The tail of the epidemic is still, or rather the pandemic is still very thick in Maharashtra. We have not really gone out of the woods right now, unlike the other states. So that's one of the concern areas which caused the task force probably to say that, yes, we should hold on reopening the schools for the time being at least.
But would it only be purely dependent on the vaccination part, or do you think that if the cases in Maharashtra, do fall beyond a certain level,
Yeah,
then
so
we can
that-
decide, or should it be left to a district versus, district to district actually?
that I think is what is the way ahead. That's what I think even they have planned it out in areas, in districts where the number of cases are low. They're actually planning to open up between 5th standard to 12th standard. That was what the initial thought process was supposed to be. Uh, as per the ICMR guidelines also, it is probably preferable to consider opening up for the younger population as against the population who are in the older age group in school. So between the 8th and the 12th, they are almost similar to what you would have in adult population. So these children are more likely to get infected as against the younger individuals. So between rather less than 12 years of age, the chances of having a severe infection actually is on the lower side. So over a period of time, probably that's how they would be planning it out, staggering it and seeing that, you have lesser number of kids coming in together in a particular classroom, keep it part online, part offline, or something of that sort. But as I said, yes, the tail of the epidemic is still thick, so they would want to probably be a little more cautious here.
Yes, but there are several other aspects also. Dr. Talwar, for example, we can plan out what happens in the classroom. We can say, okay, divide the students into 2 batches or 4 batches, let them come on alternate days, let there be social distancing in the class. What happens in terms of transport when they have, how do they travel to school? What happens during their break time, during their lunch break? Who's going to keep a check and control on how the children actually behave once they see their friends, meet their friends, and the teacher is not around? There are a lot of practical issues as well when you start reopening schools. But in Punjab, for example, we've seen in 2 school cases that, over 20 children have already infected and the schools have had to shut down. So what should the strategy now be?
Thank you so much for your this opportunity. And I think Punjab, we took a decision for opening schools when our positivity rate was very low. Our RO value was less than 1. So we thought this is a time, because I think already students have emphasized, I think, the need for opening schools. You have heard both the children. So I think with these, but we took precautions that every teacher or every worker in the school must have 2 doses of vaccine. So to make sure that those who are in the school, who are taking care of the children, they are both vaccinated. I mean, they're all with 2 doses. And of course, the all appropriate precautions, mask use, distance sitting. You're right that sometimes you have to little impress upon the children to follow these practices. And so I think all these precautions were taken, are being taken when we have opened these schools. Of course, we have learned that some schools probably both the doses the teacher didn't have. So we are trying to make sure. But as far as these 2 incidents that we in the school we had 2 schools, which was the government schools. They were in the adjoining area. We had positive 20 children. But yesterday when we did again 2,500 tests in the same other schools, it's negative. And we are making sure that 10,000 tests we were doing in the schools at random to make sure to pick up anything. I must also share with you in Ludhiana where it happened. We have looked at the total city as such. We found in the city, yes, there is some kind of a slow positivity happening in different regions of the town. And I think yesterday we did around 10,000 tests in the city. Today we are doing 15,000. So I think we are taking all due precaution just to make sure that we take precaution to children are safe. I agree with you. Issue is if child is infected, of course, they do not get much symptoms. It's only when they come back home, the parents can get exposed. So, and we are also trying that both the parents who are children going to the school should also try to get the vaccines, both the doses. So these efforts are being done. I'm sure you will agree that at some stage we had to take measures. We have to sort of initiate these kind of activity. Otherwise, a year and a half, I think, I know mentally also, it is not going to be easy for the children. So all efforts should be done with all precaution, and that's what we are trying to do.
Okay, so you're saying that precautions are being taken, and you've also conducted, and as per the orders of the government, large scale testing in other schools, and not much cases have now emerged. In fact, lots of negative cases. Dr. Jyoti
Yes.
Gupta, there are nuances to this conversation. There is no easy solution. Because the downside is also, if you don't open schools, there's a massive impact on children. If you do open schools, there is also a lot of concern. What's your view? How do we go about it?
The schools have to reopen because the learning gaps that have occurred during this year and a half, or maybe for some more time, it's not going to be easy to bridge. We've just heard the children, they want to come back to the school. So the way forward is the hybrid school, where we do not get the children to school every day, like you yourself said a little while back. Maybe children coming to the school only for 2 times a week. So they get enough time to be home to see that they've not got the infection and they are not infecting the other family members also. And they are not infecting their people who they are meeting and coming in connection with. So it's a staggered kind of a reopening of the schools that has to be done. Vaccines are very important, not just for the parents, but also for the children. So I know it is it's a little far-fetched idea to get the children vaccinated. But if we can get the children, at least who are above 12 years vaccinated, it's going to be easier for the children, and the parents are going to be a little more confident about sending the children to school. My fear is that even if we will reopen the schools and we will ask the parents to send the children to school, there are not many children who will come to the school. Because if we remember a little while back when the CBSE had come out with the circulars just before the board exams were cancelled, that the exams for 9th and 11th should happen in the offline mode and the pre-boards should happen in the offline mode. There were so many parents and there were so many children who were protesting at that point in time that we do not want to send our children to school. So again, we think we can reopen with all the COVID protocols. Social distancing can be maintained. Children can be called on alternate days with alternate roll numbers. The buses can run on half the capacity, where we again ensure that the children are sitting like one child per seat. They are sitting and they are coming to school. The parents can drop them, but then I have also seen that when they come back to the school, it's difficult for them to sit with masks on for 4 hours. They do get a little relaxed where the masks are concerned. It's not easy for the children to mask up for 4 hours also, or for 3 hours also. Then they want to go out. How much ever you tell them not to go out of their classrooms, they still walk out, to the corridors. So all the time monitoring the children is not very easy as well. So my point is that the children should also get vaccinated before they come to school, because even if there is one casualty, it's going to be very difficult for the schools to, own up the responsibility for any, for any untoward
You're
incident.
very right there, in fact, Dr. Jyoti Gupta, because I think often we've had these conversations where parents have made it clear that they expect the schools to take responsibility and the teachers to be held responsible for if their child gets infected, which is, of course, a little tricky, because the school is only one part of where the children go. If they're going anywhere else or getting infected elsewhere and then further spreading it in school to peers, then how does anybody control it? But if vaccination is the point, just like even the younger girls, the students who joined us said, Dr. Vishal Rao, how far away are we from that? Can we wait for vaccine approvals to come for students? Is there a possibility that we look at the age group of at least 12 to 18 and say, okay, let's start with them with the available vaccines?
Hi, Tanvi. I think the most relevant point here is the likelihood of getting vaccines for children seems to be most real in the age group of 12 and above at the current juncture. And that's what we've seen with US, Canada, Europe, United Kingdom. And this is an important area. And I think Karnataka today has looked at class 9 and 9 to 12 onwards for schools to be reopened. Now, this is the age group which is from 14 years onwards. Now, this is the age group that can actually have the highest likelihood, 12 and above, to receive a vaccine in the next coming months. And I'm sure all governments are looking forward towards targeting this age group to secure them first. So it would be a good step in the direction where globally, if you look at US trends, Canada, Europe, UK, they've all started vaccinating this age group of 12 and above. I think we would be following the same thread in the coming months.
And do you think we should wait for that? Because in several states, schools have reopened. Some are okay with a few cases here and there and saying we'll continue with the precautions, we'll test more
Yeah,
aggressively. Others are not too sure about reopening.
true. So I think there is no right or wrong answer here, but we can give you a balanced perspective. Now, if you look at the urban versus rural divide and gaps, you see there are reports like the child line 1098 report that talked about the devastation that the rural children, that the slum children have been going through because of lack of education, the issue of child labor, the issue of child marriage, the issue of runaway children. That's been devastating. So we need to take this in the light of understanding a balance between rural and urban. Also, I think a few weeks back, WHO and UNICEF came out with a joint statement talking about why school reopening cannot wait. And they laid emphasis about the impact of mental health, physical health, and the other aspects that already India has been grappling with about 2.3 million, 23 million children who are in the age group of above 14 and below 14. We have about 10 million odd children. So this is a very big sizable number for India to ignore. So we at this juncture, I think, need to understand and create a balance. At the same time, if you look at global guidelines, it's very, very relevant to understand that we need to also emphasize that when we're talking about school reopening, we are here talking about looking at not social and entertainment activities. We are talking about educational programs which are going to be done in a very controlled fashion. The Lancet Commission and the Indian Task Force has come out with very beautiful guidelines on this, on how to prioritize it, what are the precautions to take, how the school bubble size should be. So there are a lot more things that we need to adopt if you want to open the schools, and we need to plan this in a very balanced manner. It is also important, like for example, our health minister in Karnataka has spoken to the pediatric association. We've had discussion with the schools at the district level to understand how pediatricians, pediatric associations can be associated with clusters of school, monitor the positivity rate that is going to happen, so that we are well prepared to handle the reopening of schools. And such preparations inside schools, from the point of travel of students and from the point of view of rural and urban, needs to be taken into consideration while giving priority for understanding that this pandemic is going to last for the next couple of more months. It's not something that's just going to die down immediately, and work needs to be moved in the direction of educating children.
Yeah. No, you're right. The WHO, the United Nations have all come out with reports and warnings to say, and it's now been a year and a half, right? It's not just been about 1 month or 2 months that, students can somehow manage or cover up. We're now talking about a long period of time that's already gone by, and if you're going to push it by another 3 months or 6 months, that's bound to just add to that. So, Dr. Matthew, that's where the balance really would lie, to also factor in, unlike any other decision of unlocking, this is not the same as saying let's restart malls or restaurants, or whether we should reopen temples or not. This is about how we're children are actually getting impacted because they're locked up inside.
You come again on the question.
So how do you find this balance? Can you say just because the cases in Maharashtra are still, not below 10% positivity level, we can't reopen schools for another 6 months? Can we afford to do that?
So medically speaking, as I said, you will have to stagger the timings. You will have to look at all the protocols the way that they have defined in the WHO, UNICEF, protocols for reopening the school. You will need to follow all of those and then put it across. And that's going to require a lot more planning than what we have having currently. So I think for the time being, what the government has decided and what the task force of Maharashtra has decided probably is going to be appropriate. But having said that, they also are looking at opening up the schools in the rural area where the case loads are actually low. So I think the stance is to open up in pockets where the number of cases are low, and then eventually open up in most of the urban areas as well as the caseload reduces. But all of these will have to be planned. You cannot just suddenly say that the school has to be restarted. And the kind of COVID appropriate behavior that we see in the adults, then that itself is lacking. Asking and expecting the children to really follow it to the T is something that is not going to be possible.
Actually, Dr. Avneet, Dr. Talwar, let me come to you before I bring in Avneet Beer, because there are practicalities involved. What is it that you are seeing in Punjab where schools have reopened? Are they able to implement these norms? Because children will not always really listen when you say wear your mask.
I agree with you. This is a challenge. And I think we need to, the school teacher, they have to try to take impress upon the children. I'm sure that we can't expect 100% kind of a response. There will be some issues. But I think if you keep on reminding or taking sort of there is a adequate kind of a mentoring them, advising them, I'm sure to some extent. But I do agree there is some problem. That's why the time should be short, and it should be, I think, a few children. So I think these are challenges. There's no doubt about it. But we have to balance it out. That what is best at this time. Of course, if there are a number of cases rising in a region, I'm sure it should be precautions should be taken to close the schools.
Okay.
But when you find that the positivity rate is low, I think we need to take these kind of steps and probably learn more about also.
Okay. Avneeta, one aspect that I wanted to ask about is in some of the other states, they have left it up to the parents and said that we're not going to make it mandatory for you to send your children to school. So it's voluntary. Does that complicate things more? Few students in class, others online. Does it make it more difficult for teachers to actually handle the class?
I think teachers will be able to handle. Considering the fact that, the way teachers responded to the pandemic and the way they rose to the occasion, I don't have any doubt that teachers will not be able to, handle the complications and the nuances of this decision. And I would say that, as we go along, answers will and solutions will come. We don't have all the answers. Yes, we can plan, we can have all the protocols in place. But as we go along, we might face challenges which we did not envisage for. And so, we'll have to be open. We're actually living in a very uncertain time period where anything can happen. Now, if you're going to be scared and just say that, something fatal can happen, we'll never be able to progress. We have to teach our children how to handle uncertainty. And I also feel that somewhere we are underestimating the sense of responsibility our children take. And I've seen it with little ones, I've seen it with older ones. And if we take them along and if we, mentor them, and I'm sure those children are going to rise to the occasion, we're there. That's the job of a school, that's the job of a teacher to teach children, right? So why would the children not respond? I'm sure, as we go along, answers will come. We'll have to, time and again, recalibrate our approach. It's not as if whatever we decide now is going to be set in stone. So I would say that let us take baby steps. Let's say, okay, let's call just a few students, to school, not the entire class or not the entire, of course, the school we would not call, but even in terms of classes, let's have just maybe 50% of the students coming in, and let's not even look at academic learning to begin with. We are saying right now what is missing is the social interaction. Begin with that. Just come in for a few hours to interact with the teachers, and their peers go back. And so we take these baby steps, and gradually as we gain confidence, as the children learn to be responsible, we can, keep increasing the, the in-person time of children in school.
Okay. Dr. Jyoti Gupta, would you like to weigh in on this one as well?
So there's a lot of difference between the children who go to the government schools and the children who go to the private schools. And where the private school children have been a little privileged with the technology and access to technology, I would say that the government school children, they've not had this kind of a privilege. And we have seen that whenever the governments had allowed the children to come to school, the children in the government schools came in more than the children in the private schools. I agree with Dr. Beer when she says that we have to begin somewhere. We have to take baby steps. We have to call the children. That's why initially I also said that maybe we call the children only twice in a week. You call them on Mondays, you call them on Thursdays. Give them 2 days, 3 days time at home so that they can watch themselves and they can see that there is no infection that they are carrying for the older people. It's not just about the children, it is also about the teachers. We've lost so many teachers, we've lost so many principals to COVID during the second wave. That's just before that, the schools had reopened. We had the practical examinations in school. We had reopened the schools. We did the pre-board examinations for 9th and 11th in the offline mode. And we saw so many teachers getting infected. We saw so many children being the carriers and taking the infection back home. Having said that, we cannot keep the children away from the school for a long period of time. I totally agree that we need to reopen. We need to get the children back to school. I will put my point forward of getting the children vaccinated once again, having their parents vaccinated, having the teachers vaccinated, so that at least even if the infection is there, the fatalities are not there, and people are able to, get that confidence to send the children back to school. Having seen the children in school, it is not possible to contain them even 3 hours or 4 hours in the school with their masks on, with proper protocols all the time. The children will interact with each other. The moment the teacher is not there, the masks are going to come down. They are going to go towards the play fields. As much as you will try to control them, they will find ways to defy and go out, because after a year and a half, they would be coming to school and they're going to be just by themselves, and their parents are going to be there.
Right.
So it's a catch-22 situation. We have to be very, very careful. At the same time, we have to create standards, we have to create protocols, and we need to adhere by those. And here I would only say that the schools should not be penalized, and the total responsibility of reopening and looking after the children and having the infections thereafter, it should not come to the schools. The parents have to be equal partners. They should ensure that they are not sending the sick children to school. They should ensure that if there is infection in their society, in their neighborhood, in their families, in their extended families, then they should not send the children to school to spread the infection to the others. Because where is the
Absolutely.
infection going to come to school from? It's going to come from the teachers, it's going to come from the children. So all of us have to be extra cautious, and we have to be conscious about what we are doing.
Absolutely, absolutely right. I think the responsibility has to go both ways. Let me also go across to Mr. AGS Ganpati Rao, President of the Andhra Pradesh Primary Teachers Association. Mr. Rao, let's hear your view as well on this debate. Andhra is also planning to reopen schools in a few days from now. Is that a good decision for students and for teachers?
Actually, this is a conflict between the government and teachers also, madam. One good thing today, the Honorable High Court questioned the government, how did you open the schools without fully vaccination of teachers? The government not submit the affidavit. They are ask some permission to, within couple of days, we will submit our affidavit to the Honorable High Court. That's why we are suspecting that schools may not be reopened on 16th, madam. But a lot of we had a bad experience last year. Last year, more than 665 teachers expired only in Andhra Pradesh, madam, due to this COVID second wave and also the local body elections. That's it's very difficult time to say that, but the parents also worried about their children's education. We are also thinking that how many years this type of situation will be carried. So it's better to open the schools after vaccination to the children also, madam. It is my opinion.
After vaccination, in fact, about over 500 students and 800 teachers tested positive in Andhra Pradesh opened the schools last year after the first wave and the first lockdown. And that's what happened then. So this time, obviously, there is certain amount of concern which is there. One argument that's repeatedly raised is at least ensure the teachers are fully vaccinated, and I think everybody will agree that has to happen. Whose responsibility should that be, Dr. Talwar? Should the onus be on states? Should the onus be at least, for some private entities? Because the Niti Aayog a few days ago actually told everybody that why don't you bring in some corporates, ask them to via CSR activities vaccinate the teachers as well.
You see, as far as the vaccinating the teacher, this is because state is providing vaccine. So we have to make sure that they get on priority. And maybe, and as I mentioned to you, that in Punjab we have made it that only schools where teacher have both the doses and there even workers have both the doses, those schools should open. And if a teacher doesn't have 2 doses, he should not come. So they may have to plan how many teachers are there and then how many students can be handled. So these are challenges to the Department of Education. Of course, I think the state must make efforts to provide that as a priority to the vaccine to the teachers and the other workers working in the school. And of course, I will go even one extent further that I think we will also have to make sure educate our parents that they should also have a vaccine. Both the parents should also have vaccine. I'm sure that in the coming weeks, availability of vaccine is going to be a little more. There has been constraint, I agree. So I think these are and vaccinating children, I think the problem is that we all know that in the country, the vaccine which are available, that there's no data at the moment that they can be used for vaccination. Till we have the data, we can't go for that. So I think we need to take these steps carefully, all calibrated way, and make sure that teachers, I'm sure the teachers are responsible. Even children are also responsible once you tell them. So the state must make it as a priority to vaccinate the teachers.
Okay.
I think we are planning to open schools.
Yes, if the states who are planning to should make this a priority to ensure that the teachers are vaccinated, that's going to go a long way in also helping teachers and the students. Let me bring in Mr. Gilson on the phone line, calling us from Kerala, father of 2 children. Good evening. What is your view?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead, please. What would you like to say?
Yeah, well, definitely what I would like to say is that at least with the 25% admissions, the schools need to reopen because the children are already having some psychic problems, having problems with the eye, their problems with the ear, and all sorts of health issues. And the main thing I'd like to say is that let them be given an initiation program before the classes where they are told to behave in such a manner, and so they will behave in such and such a manner. So let them move in a bubble, like they are running cricket matches. No, the people are moving in a bubble. So like that sort of some bubble should be created. The child should be, maximum 10 to 15 children will be there, with 25% people coming in, students coming in. So let the children come to the school with the parents. After that, we say 2.5 hours, the controlling the children wouldn't be a big thing because there will be more teachers and most of the teachers are going to be there and the children will be very less. So controlling them will not be an issue as somebody pointed out earlier in the program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good point that you've made. You're saying limited to just 25%, fewer children will also make the job of the teachers easier. Okay, interesting. But somebody else is a very different point of view. Mr. Ramachandra Nair, who's in Mumbai, is also on the phone line. Mr. Nair, good evening. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. See, because I really appreciate of having that students to be continue with the school. We are all agree to that. But here the issue is that in each classes, there are something around 60 to 70 students per class. So as per the rules notified by the government is that one student per bench. So how this can be accommodated? And secondly, the teachers. So per day there will be around five to six subjects are there. How teachers can manage with that? So it is very difficult. And third thing is that students has to carry their mask throughout the classes, and that I don't think that there will be sufficient air circulation in that. It will create a health problem for the students. So this is my concern over here.
Okay, you've spoken like a classic Mumbai resident. Dr. Anita would agree. We have so much of such high population density that's always a big concern. Perhaps that's why, Dr. Anita, even the task force is a little bit more cautious, because in states like Maharashtra, it is difficult, the kind of population we have in cities like Mumbai. I think you're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself.
But it is actually difficult in a city like Mumbai to manage with those many students in a class. So that's why I said the school will have to plan it out well in advance as to how they are going to move ahead. All that clarity has to be there before the child goes to school. Because the onus, I agree, is going to be both on the parents and the teachers. But you also have to think about the healthcare facilities that are there in the background. We are ramping up, but we are not going to be able to manage with a huge overload of patients again.
So let me ask you this question, and then I'll also take it across to Dr. Vishal Rao. But Dr. Anita, to you first. There was much conversation about the vulnerability of children, towards the end of the second wave, and whether they are more vulnerable or less vulnerable. Several states, including Maharashtra, said they're going to set up special pediatric wards ahead of the third wave. Are we any clearer now on what is the level of vulnerability? Is it any different than adults?
So we don't, to be honest with you, there is no major clarity on this. We do know that the children have also been affected, and there has been a zero surveillance study to prove that the number of children who have got infected are also there, and there is a certain amount of immunity that they and themselves have as well. But having said that, children generally do not have severe disease. That's something that is known. It is between a particular age group that the infection levels and the severity may be a little on the higher side. That's about the age group of 12, where they generally act like an adult. Now, this vis-a-vis, we also have different variants which are coming up. And that's where the concern is. If you do not have a majorly vaccinated population, I'm not talking about the pediatric population, here I'm talking about the adult population. If you're looking at a majorly vaccinated population, then the risk that is entailed is going to be lower as compared to the ones wherein you just still have only half the population. Or rather, I think in Maharashtra, it's 1 in 4 people in Mumbai who have been completely vaccinated. So if you are going to ramp up the vaccination, then opening schools also make a lot more, it's going to be a little better to do it at that time.
Would you agree, Dr. Vishal Rao, that, there is still not too much clarity on whether children will be more vulnerable or not?
No, I think if you look at the WHO report and the Lancet Commission report that has come out, they very clearly state that the younger the children, the more they are protected. It's very, very clear that the younger the children, the more they're protected, the less likely that they're going to transmit the infection. And this has come out both from the WHO report, from studies in UK, from Africa, and even in the latest Lancet Commission report from the Indian Task Force. All of this coming out very clearly stating that the younger the children, the lesser the transmission. The older the children, the higher the rate of transmission. And I think this is something that we will need to consider even when we open up schools, because the paradox here is the younger the children, the less likely they are to comply with the COVID social norms. And the older the children, the higher they are going to comply with the norms, but higher they're going to transmit. So this is the current data that is showing from global studies, and we need to keep this in mind when we open up schools. that nonetheless, the recommendations and guidelines are all favoring towards primary schools and towards kids lower than 10 years who can be lesser chances of transmission, and these are actually the safer of the bet. Nonetheless, the data, some of the data from the first wave, if you see published data from the journal, from few of the journals, like the Indian data that has come out, I remember one case group from Chennai that actually published their data from a pediatric hospital showed that there was nearly 16% cases in their, I think 463 odd cases that they analyzed of children who had come and got admitted, of which they found 16% of them had multi-system inflammatory disease, and about 8% of the children had severe disease. So this is from the first wave. The second wave data, I've not really read anything in the recent past, but what's important to understand from this is that nonetheless children can get infected. 16% of them can have multi-system inflammatory disease. So pediatric hospitals need to be geared up for the third wave to understand that this group is a vulnerable group, and nonetheless all preparations need to be set forward to keep these possibilities in mind that children are vulnerable. Now the current data even from Karnataka and other states are also showing that even if they have multi-system inflammatory disorders, it is not fatal, it is not life threatening, they recover very well. However, the fear and anxiety among parents is valid that yes, they are going to be vulnerable for infection one way or the other.
Okay, so you mentioned about different age groups and maybe how difficult or easy it would be to control them or make them follow the norms. Let me ask that question to Mr. Ganapati Rao. Mr. Rao, is it easier to, I don't know, in a country where adults don't follow COVID norms, is it any easier with a 5-year-old or a 13-year-old?
It's not easy to follow the code norms, madam. Why? Because the children is actually village children that doesn't have that much of knowledge, madam. It is very critical to follow the COVID norms in schools, madam. Actually, the village people, the parents did not take any care of the children, madam. And also, the government of Andhra Pradesh, this 16th onwards, they are implementing NEP 2020, madam. So many schools were merged, and the strength of the children will increase it in the schools. In so many schools, there is no space for the students also. Why our government is enthusiastic to open the schools early? It is very difficult to control the children also, madam. From third class to 10th class schools now merged. A lot of children will be there. There is the aged students and small children also there. They did not follow the guidelines, madam.
That only teachers would be well aware of and will have to at some point handle today or tomorrow. But of course, it's also the teachers who do understand that the education and the development, both physical and mental development of children is also getting impacted because of this pandemic. And perhaps we cannot delay reopening schools any longer. We need to very quickly, and this is the last point I want to make, Dr. Talwar, we need to very quickly get our plans in order and get moving. I mean, at the end of the day, the same families, the same parents are also taking their children out to socialize or to meet their relatives, to meet their own friends, to go to a tourist hotspot for the weekend, sometimes even to the restaurant or the mall.
Ma'am?
To Dr. Talwar, yes.
Madam, as far as you see, there is a need to open schools. There we must take all precautions, and the best precaution at the moment is vaccination. And I think, as we know, the children, we don't have the vaccine as yet. We must make sure the teacher and other workers in the school have both doses to take abundant precaution. And even I will say that parents of the children should also go for vaccine. And now, so these are the precautions, but we have to make sure that what number of students come. Each school, as has been said, has to look at their own kind of availability of the staff, teacher staff, the other worker staff, and how many students it can will be there according to that in the school. So I think we need to make all these efforts. But of course, I agree, if there we need to be very cautious and monitoring very closely. If you find in the community or some around there or some school there are some issues of infection, must close immediately and try to do surveillance properly to see what is the source, how the infection has come. Is it a slow infection in the society or something else? So all these have to be, this is a very challenging time and we have to be frankly working in a war-like situation. We cannot be lax on these issues. So we have to take each step with all caution, but with all precaution. But I'm sure that if we do all this, we should be able to. The only issue that, frankly, from the school children, it comes to my mind is that very small children, when the primary school children go to school, if somebody is infected and comes back home, it won't be possible to isolate him. The parents, one of the parent has to be the child.
Right.
It's very difficult.
Right.
That's one challenge that I think, that's why I feel that maybe primary school will be more cautious and we must make sure the parents who are both at the doses, they may allow their children. So
Right.
these are each, it has to be done with a all precaution, all kind of ways so that we make sure that we don't land into any kind of a issue. And so I think it's a very constantly monitoring kind of a activity. But at the same time, we must realize the mental status of the children.
Yeah,
To
I
get home,
absolutely. I mean, to be holed up and at home for most of the time, to only have screen level interactions or to only see your parents' face, for 18 straight months can get to any child. So yes, we must start looking towards, how we can reopen schools and get our children back in schools in a good, proper plan manner with all the precautions. Of course, there will always be fear and there will be infections as well. But just like every other aspect, even for our children's life, where we are willing to go a step further in times of a pandemic, maybe even with schools. Let's see, let's wait and watch. As long as precautions are taken, staff is vaccinated, hopefully even the parents are vaccinated, soon the students could get vaccinated, we should be all right. Completely out of time. Big thank you to all of our panelists for joining me on this conversation.